As we continue our study in the book of Revelation, let's look now at the seventh bowl judgment. That's Revelation chapter 16 and verse 17. And the seventh poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out from the temple of heaven, from the throne, saying, "It is done." We will see here that the seventh bowl brings its own judgment. Remember that the seventh seal didn't have a judgment, it had seven trumpets. And remember that the seventh trumpet didn't have a judgment, it had instead seven bowls. But now we come to the last of the bowls, and the last one does have its own judgments. This again is support for the telescopic view. Seals, the last seal contains the seven trumpets, the last trumpet contains the seven bowls. This view of the logical arrangement, the structural arrangement of what we see clearly, the seven seals, trumpets, and bowls of the book of Revelation. And this bowl's judgment is accompanied by the voice from the temple of heaven, from the throne, saying, "It is done." It's from the temple, it's from the throne. From the throne really does seem to give the impression that this is from God the Father, who is seated on the throne, the one who is seated on the throne. It is done. The Greek words here, "it is done," are different from the words that the Lord spoke on the cross. It is finished. Verse 18, and there were lightning, roaring, and thunder, and there was a great earthquake, such as had never happened since man has been on the earth. So great was that earthquake. This terrifying storm and earthquake spoken of in this verse are a result of the pouring out of the seventh bowl. The seventh bowl does have its own judgment, unlike the seventh seal and the seventh trumpet. In chapter 4, verse 5, and in 11:19, and now here, we see this increasing intensity of these judgments. And here, this is the most intense of this stair-step kind of judgments upon the earth. Seals, trumpets, bowls, things have been getting more intense. And that's demonstrable as we see this intentional stair-stepping repetition of judgments. 3 judgments, and then 4, and then 4 again, and now here, 5 judgments. Yes, there is a stair-stepping intensity that's showing that we are moving through the whole 7-year period in the book of Revelation. Remember that terrifying earthquakes were fairly common, all too common, in the province of Asia, and some of these cities, Laodicea and some of the others, had been destroyed by earthquakes. So they knew something of the power of terrible earthquakes. But this text is explicitly says, such as had never happened since man has been on the earth. So great was that earthquake. Verse 19 continues concerning that earthquake. Verse 19 says, and the great city became 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And Babylon the Great was remembered before God, to give her the cup of the wine of the anger of his wrath. The great city is Babylon in 17:18 and 18:10, several verses in chapter 18. Curiously, in 11:8, the expression great city refers to Jerusalem, but here it's clearly Babylon. And so this verse tells us in brief what will be described in more detail in chapters 17 and 18. Here we simply read that it became 3 parts, and Babylon is remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the anger of his wrath. This expression is very powerful. Morris says even, nowhere in this book is there an expression as emphatic as that rendered the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. In 14:8, we read that Babylon gave all the nations drink of the wine of her immoral passion. So in the end, God will give her that cup which she must drink. Yes, God is righteous. There is a correspondence between the sin and the must follow on judgments. Note that this isn't just Babylon that falls in this earthquake. The cities of the nations fell. All of the cities of the nations will fall. But we focus here on the fate of Babylon, that great enemy of the people of God. And the focus is even more specific in chapter 17 and 18, where this fall of Babylon is described in more detail. Verse 20, and every island fled, and no mountains were found. Well, this is a very powerful earthquake. No earthquake has ever done this in the history of humanity. One more detail is given in verse 21 about this plague of the seventh bowl. Verse 21, and great hailstones weighing about a talent each come down from heaven on people, and the people blaspheme God because of the plague of hail, since the plague was very severe. So again, this element of great hailstones brings the number of elements of this plague up to 5. And that is the stair-stepped increase from what we read earlier in 4:5, 8:5, 11:19, and here. And this reminds us of the seventh plague of Exodus 9. And you could also look in Joshua 10:11 and Psalm 78, 47 and 48. There are various places in the Old Testament where hail is connected to judgments. Note that these hailstones come down on people. People are the target of these hailstones. This is deadly. And they come from heaven explicitly. This is from God. These hailstones weigh about a talent each. The weight of a talent varied through time. The Standard Greek Lexicon of the New Testament, BDAG, says that the weight of a talent varied between 26 and 36 kilograms. Hail, it turns out, is formed by repeated additions of layers of ice. And so, depending on weather conditions, hailstones can be quite large. In the town that I grew up, we used to see hailstones that were just very small. But once, my wife and I were in Texas coming out of a restaurant. We came up to a car. We saw a car there with this, two big areas of the front windshield that were smashed. And it was quite strange looking. It looked like someone had taken a hammer and somehow broken in. Big, large areas of the front windshield were smashed. Well, there was someone inside the car. And so we asked this person in the car, what happened to your windshield? And she said, hailstones. And she said they were as big as grapefruits that fell on her car. Yes, but these hailstones, well, and certainly if a hailstone as big as a grapefruit hit you on the head, you would die. But these hailstones will weigh a talent each, which again is between 26 to 36 kilograms. I don't know how big those are, but if a hailstone weighing 26 kilograms came down from heaven and hit you anywhere, it would be completely fatal. Well, what is the response of humanity to this hailstone judgment? The people blasphemed God. Again, last judgment, last element of the last judgment, and the note is the people blasphemed God. They were not willing to repent. Chapter 16 ends here, but chapter 17 and chapter 18 go into greater detail to the judgment of Babylon, which is just mentioned in that last seventh bowl judgment. So let's look on to chapters 17 and 18 for more detail about this description of this one particular city. Remember, the cities of the nations fell, but God draws our attention specifically to the future judgment upon this one city, Babylon.